As families getting ready for the 2025 school year, the high cost of school uniforms and school stationery continue to be a burden for many. And to highlight and intervene, in 2023, the Competition Commission of South Africa released the report, Outcomes of the Competition Commission's Interventions in School Uniform Procurement Report. It found that some schools had exclusive supply agreements with specific suppliers or manufacturers of school uniforms and charged excessive prices for school uniforms to the detriment of customers. So to get an update on what's been happening or what has happened since the release of the report, we joined virtually by Karabo-Motaung Mohlala, the Principal Analyst for Advocacy at the Competition Commission of South Africa. Ms. Motaung Mohlala, very good morning to you. Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to Morning Live.
Good morning to your viewers, and thank you very much for having me.
It's an absolute pleasure. Great to have you this morning. For so many years now, at the beginning of each school year, we've been dealing with the issue of school uniforms and the high cost of stationery. Since the release of your report, has there been any transparency?
So since the release of that report, the Commission has really been going out to ensure that schools are complying with the guidelines. And what we've also been doing is signing undertakings with the schools as a pledge for them to ensure that they will ensure that their procurement processes with regards to school uniform are as transparent, are competitive, and that they are in line with the guidelines of school uniform. So there has been some movement. Of course, we are still receiving complaints from parents, but we are taking the complaints as and when they come. However, largely though, we are seeing some sort of transformation, particularly in the larger school groups, right, where we are receiving fewer complaints around those schools, but also in our report itself. I mean, we did go back and look at whether or not some of the bigger school groups that the Commission had concluded settlement agreements with earlier during its investigation were indeed complying with the guidelines, and we have indeed seen a change. What we are seeing now is, in terms of complaints, is that they're coming from, your small schools, from parents whose children go to smaller schools, fewer learners, and maybe in smaller communities where, again, the issue of the school only having one supplier still being the main concern.
And after your investigations, which found that some schools had exclusive supply agreements with specific suppliers or manufacturers of school uniforms, what are some of the changes that you've seen?
So one of the things that we had asked is that schools, reduce the number of unique items in their school uniform line, right? So you'll find that the school has the blazer has a badge, the shirt has a badge, everything is so unique to the school that a parent cannot get it anywhere else. And so one of the things that we had asked the schools to do is to reduce the number of unique items that are in the school uniform line, right? So, I mean, if a parent can get a navy blue or a black blazer from any retailer and they can procure a badge from the school, perhaps that is one way. Parents should also be allowed to just buy a plain white shirt from whichever retailer that they can afford, So that's one of the things. The second major thing was that when appointing suppliers, schools ought to go through a competitive tender process. So they need to be able to issue out a notice that invites suppliers from across the board to come and present to the school what it is that they can offer the school and the prices at which they can offer the school. And through that competitive process, then schools should then pick or choose a supplier who is reasonable but also produces the quality that the school requires, right? And I think the last major thing was that what we have insisted that schools do is that once they have concluded this agreement with the supplier, is that agreement should not be longer than 5 years, because in those previous investigations, we found that these agreements between schools and suppliers were evergreen. They had no termination clause. There was no way to get out, right? And these agreements had been in place for over 40, 50 years. So we've been very clear to say agreements must be as long as 5 years, and at the end of that 5-year period, the school must run and repeat that competitive bidding process again, so as to give other people an opportunity to come once again and present what it is that they can present to the school.
And why are these agreements quite problematic from a competition perspective, and how do they affect market dynamics?
Because you can imagine if a school has one supplier, that supplier faces no competition whatsoever. They know that for as long as they are with that school, they can charge however much they want to charge, right? And the thing with not having or having that competitive threat, right, means that you can do as and how you please. So of course that will always result in excessive pricing because there's no competition, there's no competitive pressure that is forcing you as a supplier to make sure that you reduce your cost, that you are as efficient as possible so that your products at the end of the day can be as cost effective as possible. Another thing is that it prevents prospective suppliers from coming into the market. I mean, if one school has a supplier for about 50 years, anyone else who's a new upcoming young SME that is looking to go into the school uniform space is already blocked out from getting into that space because that school or will tell them I already have a supplier. Whereas if every 5 years this potential supplier has an opportunity to go every other year, perhaps even if they don't get the first round, they can be told this is what you can do to improve, and they can improve their quality so that the next time, after the next 5 years, when this opportunity arises again, they are in a better place and perhaps more readier.
And apart from the exorbitant cost of school uniforms, families are also concerned about the high cost of school, school stationery. Have you received any official complaints on this matter, and how is it being addressed by the Competition Commission?
We have indeed, and we saw this particularly during COVID, as you'll recall that schools started introducing masks, schools started using technological devices, and schools were now being prescriptive to parents in terms of which devices the schools wanted to use. And so what we did in 2022, together with the Department of Basic Education, we issued a joint circular that now applies the same guidelines on school uniform to things like stationery, right? So where again, we are saying schools must go through a competitive process in the appointment of suppliers of stationery, but also any other learning-related goods. So beyond just stationery and school uniform, the guidelines are generic, they are specific, and they apply across the board. We are seeing, other problems in, for example, your school transportation, your school nutrition systems. And so the same guidelines do apply to those programs, so to school procurement more broadly.
And how do the findings of this report, reflect the broader competition concerns in South Africa? And what does this case say in particular about the role of public institutions like school in terms of trying to maintain a competitive working environment?
I think what is important, Simpiwe, is really the role of SGBs and parents in our schools. And I think sometimes as parents, we sit back when we are called to sit on SGB boards. And those SGB boards are really the voice for the people and for the learners of that school. And I think once we parents and SGB start playing that role and holding schools accountable, holding the principal accountable to ensure that all the procurement processes of each school is competitive and complies with the guidelines of school uniform broadly, we will see a change. We will see new suppliers potentially coming into the market. We will see new firms coming up. And of course, we know that as new firms come up, as the projects get bigger, they are able to employ additional people. And so there is a direct link, right, between school procurement processes as well as potential growth in employment in the country.
Let's talk about the legal or the regulatory mechanisms available to the Competition Commission to prevent such anti-competitive behavior. How effective are these mechanisms in ensuring that schools and suppliers alike adhere to competition laws?
So the Commission can indeed, once it has finalized its investigation, can prosecute schools and those suppliers that are found to have contravened the Competition Act. The Commission was very clear from the very beginning that we are not interested in prosecuting schools. It is not something that is in the best interest of the school. We believe that schools should really be focused on providing the basic education to learners rather than being involved in litigious processes in and out of court, because those processes do take time. we have said that, we are more interested in helping schools comply with the guidelines and rather to change behavior of the majority than to really be chasing 10 schools out of the over 20,000 public schools and 2,000 private or independent schools that we have in the country. With the suppliers, however, we've been very strict as well. We are also in a position where we can prosecute. However, what we did with the largest supplier back then was to conclude settlement agreements, because like I said, again, what is important for us is change in behavior. And so as part of those settlement agreements, one of the things that they were required to remove from the contracts was a clause that makes them an exclusive supplier of that school, firstly, but also a clause that includes a termination date. So where once again, the supplier acknowledges that their contract with the school will only be for a period of 5 years and nothing more. So those are just some of the steps that the Commission has taken from a legal perspective, but I must say that the Commission can prosecute. We have decided not to because, like I said, our idea was that we want to change behavior. There's way too many schools in the country for us to be going around and really prosecuting each school, but we do want to change behavior overall across the board.
And just beyond the Competition Commission's interventions, what other solutions do you think would help prevent schools from entering into exclusive supplier agreement with suppliers that would harm consumers in the long term? And would increased transparency in procurement processes help mitigate these issues, perhaps?
Absolutely. And we do call for schools to be transparent, actually, in the processes that they follow when they procure the school uniform. Simpiwe, I think for me, what is of utmost importance is the only way we're probably going to see the prices of school uniform going down is if schools themselves reduce the number of unique items in their school uniform item, because this means that the supplier or this appointed supplier will only be providing a few items, right? Okay. And parents can then go and get the balance from somewhere else where it is that they can afford.
All right. Karabo, great chatting to you. Thank you so much for your time. That was Karabo-Motaung Mohlala, Principal Analyst Advocacy at the Competition Commission of South Africa, giving us an update on the implementation of the findings regarding the high cost of school uniform.